Now, last October 2012, I had the great opportunity to attend the annual Trialogos Festival here in Tallinn, for the first time, I might add. It was also held right here in this medieval structure called the Katariina kirik. This festival of lectures, of music, and poetry was quite impressive and very inspiring for me. I saw and experienced something very special at the Trialogos Festival here in Tallinn. I heard good lectures by the speakers and very good questions from the audience. Anyone present at the Trialogos 2013 could sense a real hunger for the truth, a hunger for goodness. You could sense this hunger from both the young and from the old people who attended Trialogos. There was such an open environment to share ideas and to discuss important, relevant topics for our world today. A festival like Trialogos can be very powerful for a society. It can greatly benefit that society by encouraging thought, reflection, love for truth, and love for goodness, values which are unfortunately often forgotten in today's contemporary world of machines, computers, and iPhones. Therefore, we dreamed that our little foundation here in Estonia, Fidelitas, could somehow continue the spirit of Trialogos here in Tallinn. But how? One of the goals of our Fidelitas Foundation is to work for the good of Estonian citizens. And in order to do this, we wanted to somehow create an echo to this annual Trialogos Festival of lectures and art. But again, how? Well, one evening, I had a very interesting conversation with Mr. Taivo Niitvägi. We spoke about the future of Estonia, the future of Estonian society, the future of the Estonian language, and the future of Estonian culture. We spoke about the various social problems in Estonia and wondered what we could do. Eventually, we decided to organize a conference of lectures about where exactly Estonia is going today. Hence part of the title today, Quo Vadis Estonia? Where are you going, Estonia? Where will you be in 50 years, Estonia? What will become of you? Thanks to the tremendous help of Taivo Niitvägi and Hereditas, we were able to organize this conference. Now, because this is Fidelitas' first organized conference, you may have already noticed many imperfections already in our organizing this conference. We certainly apologize. We fully admit that we could have organized things better, and next time we certainly will. We would beg your patience and your mercy and understanding if there are organizational problems throughout the day, such as light problems or what have you. We are far from experiencing these things, but it's a humble beginning for Fidelitas. We must understand that such wonderful things can happen for people at a conference of lectures, such as Trialogos or today's conference. People begin to think. People begin to think together. People begin to discuss. People begin to ask questions and attempt to give answers. People begin again to care about truth, ideas, goodness. They temporarily shut off their cell phones, computers, and machines and begin again to think about serious matters. And they do this together. For it is only together that we can bring about a real beneficial change for society. It is only together that we can help the Estonian civil society in a beneficial way. And this is why we decided to organize the conference today. This is why we invited the speakers who are here today. Now, everyone knows the famous Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher. Socrates told us, of course through his student Plato, because Socrates left us no writings, that the main work of his life as a philosopher, or lover of wisdom, was to help the citizens of his Greek society to become better human beings. He said that this work of helping people to become better human beings through philosophical investigation was actually the most important work of the state, because a society is good or bad insofar as its citizens are good or bad. Socrates saw his work as a great benefit for the Greek state and for civil society, and truly it was. But how did he do his work? What was his work? He told us that his work consisted in helping others to clarify their ideas upon which they base their actions. He taught us that our actions and our behavior necessarily obey and follow our ideas about reality. We can only act and move toward what we think to be good. But before we can act for the good, we must determine what is good. Therefore, Socrates taught us that it is necessary to clarify our ideas through thinking and through philosophizing, in order that we might correctly know the good and act for the good. Philosophically, we can say that our moral philosophy depends on our metaphysics of reality. When we do this, we are able to live well as true rational human beings and achieve happiness. And so, this small, humble little conference today, organized by Fidelitas with the great help of Hereditas, hopes to somehow imitate Socrates in this important work. It hopes and wants to somehow contribute in a small way to the great work of helping the citizens of this Estonian civil society to clarify and refine their ideas about civil society in order to continue the work of improving and strengthening this Estonian society and the citizens of this society. Quo vadis, Estonia? Where are you going, Estonia? In order to answer this, we must understand the necessary values, goods, and principles for every civil society. For if we know the necessary values, goods, and principles for every society, then together we can work toward implementing them in the Estonian civil society. Therefore, the fundamental question we must ask today is, what exactly are the values necessary for a civil society? What principles and values must a civil society promote and protect in order to survive? How does a civil society survive? Now, of course, this is a very big and difficult question, and we certainly do not have the time to answer it completely today. But still, our conference today hopes to shed some light on this question, a question which is very important if we hope to answer the other question, Quo vadis, Estonia? Where are you going, Estonia? Therefore, all of today's lectures will somehow be directed at trying to answer or illustrate the importance of these questions. Now, for today's schedule. Before discussing some of the necessary values for civil society, Mr. Udo Vooglaid will present a lecture on the current social situation in Estonia and the current social problems in Estonia. This lecture will be very interesting and important in order to help us understand a little bit about what the actual situation in Estonian civil society is today. And therefore, what must be done in the future. He will also speak to us about what is actually necessary in order to truly change a civil society, as opposed to a mere change in facade. After this, at 11:45, Mr. N. Auxman will present a lecture on the importance of the cardinal virtue of justice in civil society. Of course, there are 4 cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. But it is justice which is so important for civil society. He will speak to us about how this virtue of justice is being practiced and executed in contemporary Estonian society. After this, we will have a short recess for lunch. We will return in the afternoon at about 3:15, and Mr. Varo Vogelheid will speak to us about the necessity of the traditional family in civil society, and also how the traditional family is under severe attack in today's world. This will be a very important lecture because of the absolute necessity of strong family values in civil society. At 4 o'clock, Mr. Thomas Nigola will speak to us about the necessity of law enforcement and military in society. But he will also speak about why morality and ethics are necessary in order to guide and direct the police and military in civil society. This lecture will be very interesting because of Mr. Nigola's experience as a Lutheran chaplain for both the police and the military. Finally, Father Karl Stellen will speak to us about the importance of properly educating the youth in a civil society. The future of every civil society is the youth. He will explain the duties of educators to form the young student's intellect and will in order to live virtuously and responsibly later. Now, always keeping in mind today the main question, Quo vadis Estonia? Where are you going, Estonia? We want to speak about the values and principles necessary to sustain a healthy and human civil society. We want to reflect on the question, what exactly are the values necessary for a civil society? What principles and values must a civil society promote and protect in order to survive? How does a civil society survive? But first, let us briefly establish what is a society. We will begin with the classical definition of society, taken from the ancient Greek philosophers. The ancients taught us that firstly, a society is a group of individuals, a community. This is the first part of the definition of society, a group, community. This means that several individuals, at least 2, come together in order to somehow form some kind of group. Secondly, this group has some purpose, some goal, some operation together. This purpose or this goal somehow unites the members of the group together toward a common goal. In English, we say this is the point of the society. This unity in function or unity in operation is very, very important. Without this purpose, without this goal, the unity of the group disappears, and eventually the group disappears. Every society is a group of individuals united and working together somehow toward some common purpose or goal. This is the wisdom of the ancients. Simply put, all societies have this in common. A group of individuals united together by some common purpose or goal. Think of all the various types of societies. Not only civil society, but also domestic society, like the family, or a school, or a church parish, or even labor societies like a workers' union, or recreational societies like a chess club or an art society. All of them are groups of individuals united together by some common purpose or goal. Now, obviously, for a society to sustain itself, for a society to continue to exist, that society must ensure that it has individuals and that the society is united together in pursuing the purpose and the goal of the society. Both are necessary. Of course, ensuring that the society has individuals is important, but ensuring that the society is united together in pursuing the purpose and goal of that society is even more important. Individuals and a common purpose or goal. Yet, if a society is composed of many individuals and one common goal, how is it possible, therefore, to unite all the individuals in order that they work together toward that common goal? We have many individuals, they have a common purpose. How do we get them to work together? Of course, because they are all members of the same society, they all have the same goal or purpose. But how do we get them to work together toward that goal? We all know very well how difficult it is for many individuals to agree on exactly how to accomplish some goal. For instance, what if we together wanted to build a house? Of course, supposing that we knew how to build a house. Each of us would have our own ideas about how it should be done. There would, of course, be many opinions, many debates, and even many fights. What would be able to unite our efforts, our work together? Well, the ancients taught us that this is the duty of authority, leadership. All societies need authority. It is authority which unifies the individuals together in order that the individuals work together toward the common goal. This is why authority is necessary in every society. But, of course, as we well know, authority itself therefore has a purpose. It has a function. It does not exist for its own sake. All authority has a serious responsibility. Authority exists in order that the goal or the purpose of the society is realized. The work of authority is to realize the goal of the society. The authority exists for the goal. It is a servant of the goal. Authority exists to unify the members of the society and to coordinate and direct their efforts toward fulfilling the purpose of that society. Now, as for authority, this applies to all societies, to the fathers of families, to the pastors of religious societies, to the directors of art societies, to the directors of schools. All societies must have this authority, and this authority has this responsibility to realize the goal of the society. But this principle applies especially to civil society. Civil government has a purpose. It has a goal. And that goal is to unify the many individuals within the society, and that in order that all can work together toward the goal of civil society. The goal of civil society. Civil government can never forget its purpose. It exists to unify the members of civil society and coordinate and direct their efforts toward realizing the goal of civil society. When a civil government forgets this, or chooses to ignore this, well, then that government has become, in definition, meaningless and without purpose. A civil government that does not fulfill this slowly corrupts into a totalitarian regime, which cares nothing for the goals of civil society, but only for the ideological goals of the regime. This is what happens to an authority which doesn't function as it should. It doesn't follow its essence, its purpose. But what goal must civil authority or civil government work towards in civil society? If civil government must work for the goal of civil society, then what is the goal of civil society? And here is the great question. What is the goal of civil society? And this is precisely where we have a great division between the ancient world and the modern world. What is the goal of civil society? Why do we have civil society? Well, the ancient Greeks tell us that the goal of civil society is the good life, the happy life, to provide for the citizens a good life. Civil society exists for happiness, a true happy life. Now, what does this mean, a good life? For the average man today, the good life is comfort, pleasure, hedonism. But for the ancients, the good life does not mean a life of comfort, pleasure, and hedonism. The good life for the ancients meant the life of virtue. Only the virtuous life brings true happiness. The good life is the virtuous life lived in society. Therefore, the civil government must help its citizens to become virtuous in order that they can live well in society and be truly happy. The work of civil government was to make good citizens, to help citizens become good, virtuous, truly good and virtuous people. For if people become good and virtuous, then they will live well and be happy, and thus fulfilling the goal of civil society. This was the goal of civil society for the ancients. The goal of civil society was to provide the citizens with all the means necessary in order to become virtuous, to live well, and be truly happy. This, therefore, for the ancients, was the goal and purpose of civil government, to make good citizens, to help them become good, virtuous. Civil government had to unite the individuals of civil society and coordinate and direct their efforts toward making available all the means necessary for the good and virtuous life in the state. The civil government had to ensure that the good life, the virtuous life, was even possible. This was the purpose of civil authority. Here we have the wisdom of the ancients and the scholastics who followed them. They followed this line of thinking and united it through the Middle Ages together with Catholicism. The goal of the civil society is to help people become virtuous, to have a natural happiness on earth. The goal of civil society. Therefore, the goal of civil government. Now, as I said before, this main question, what is the goal of civil society, has a great division between the ancients and scholastics and the modern world. After the Enlightenment, the French Revolution, and modern liberalism, the purpose or goal of civil society was changed. As I said before, the ancient Greeks and the scholastics taught that the goal of civil society was happiness, which was a life of virtue in society. But the modern political philosophers asserted that independence, freedom, and individual liberty were the goals of civil society. In the modern age, civil government must work to ensure the liberty and the freedom of each individual. It must not concern itself with so-called virtue or happiness or this good life, because these are only subjective. Civil government must only concern itself with protecting the individual's liberty. This is the goal of civil society, the goal of civil government, to protect the individual's liberty. Civil government must only concern itself with protecting the individual's liberty. Therefore, liberty, freedom, independence became the most important value for civil society. This was, of course, a big change. It's why you learn in history that the modern world is different from the medieval and ancient world. It's a total change of the society, of the very essence of point of civil society. The ancients taught us civil society, the goal of civil society is the good life, the virtuous life. The moderns tell us, no, the goal of civil society is protecting your and my liberty. Now, many of us would dare to say this was a bad change. Of course, we would say that human liberty, it must be protected, of course. But to exalt liberty as the main value in society, to make it the goal of civil society itself, seems to be going too far. Because we can never have the liberty to do evil. We can never have the liberty to willingly neglect virtue and choose vice. Of course, immorality has always existed. But now, the very liberty to be immoral is many times, in fact, protected by the state, by the modern state. It is the very goal of the modern state to protect your liberty to do these things. For the modern state, you have the right to be immoral if you freely choose, of course, without harming others, or so they say. This is the necessary consequence of exalting liberty as the greatest value in civil society. Of course, liberty is very important, but is it more important than the virtuous life, the good life? This is in fact one serious problem within the very heart of the modern state and modern civil society, which I think we must seriously reconsider. All modern states have followed the example of the French Revolution, France and the United States, in exalting liberty as the most important goal of the state. This is something we should reconsider. And we should reconsider the ancient conception of civil society, the ancient and scholastic. The goal for the ancients was the virtuous life, the good life, to make good citizens. The modern state is under a little bit of an illusion that they can make people happy by allowing them to do what they want, to be free. But as the ancients knew this was an illusion, they knew that only the virtuous life brings true happiness. They knew that for a person to do whatever he wishes to do, free, to be free, does not bring happiness. Now, how can we choose the model of a modern civil society which exalts liberty to such a degree that now people have the right to be immoral over the ancient conception of civil society, which seeks the perfection and virtue and goodness of its citizens? These are questions to ponder. Now, but setting aside this great debate between the modern world and the ancient world as to the true purpose of civil society, because it in fact is a very big debate, the essence of civil society, the goal of civil society. Let us move on to the next lecture. Our next speaker today will be Ulo Vooglaid. Now, Mr. Ulo Vooglaid is currently a retired professor. He studied pedagogy at Haapsalu Pedagogical School, history at the University of Tartu, and social psychology and sociology at the Leningrad State University and the Moscow Institute of Social Studies. He was a professor at the University of Tartu and the University of Tallinn and the Institute of Qualification Improvement of Executives and Specialists. His research interests include the philosophy of education, the foundations of scientific research, methodology, and finally, organizational and management theory. He is also a member of the Estonian Association for the Club of Rome. Now, Mr. Ulo Vooglaid will speak to us today about some of the current sociological problems in Estonia. He will help us to see the present situation in Estonia. But he will also explain some sociological preconditions for any society to truly change. He has a deep background in sociology and has studied the nature of society for many years. This lecture will be very useful and important because today we are speaking about what principles and values Estonian society must have if it wants to continue to exist. This lecture will begin to show us how important these questions are. So without further ado,